Nice to see you all. Let's see if you can. This is good?
Yeah, try. Speak into it.
Yeah, you can hear?
Yes.
Not too loud? It's good. Better without?
No.
With? Okay. When I was a child, I had many storybooks. One of the storybooks was the story of Aladdin, in which somebody is given 3 wishes. Anybody knows that story?
Yeah.
Did you ever wonder if you were given 3 wishes, what you would ask for? Okay, so now I'm going to ask you, if you are given 3 wishes, and these were wishes of knowledge, what would you ask for? If someone comes and grants you any wish you want in terms of knowledge, thank you. In terms of knowledge, you can ask for anything, and you know that you will be granted the absolute truth, and you will know the absolute truth. What would you like to know? Okay, too many people here to answer the question. So I'm going to make a guess, and you're going to tell me if you agree, okay? So I'm going to say question number 1. If you agree, you say yes. If you don't agree, don't say no, because my therapist says it's not good for my self-esteem. So here we go. The wish number 1 that most people want to know with absolute certainty, is this true, is does God exist? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Wish number 2 that most people want to know is, what's the purpose of life? Agree?
Yes.
Okay. And the third one? What's the safest and best long-term investment? Okay. So people who had near-death experiences receive the answers to these questions and many more. And this is how it goes. Let's start with a story. My friend Liba, who I met in Toronto when we were living in Toronto, was around 20 years old when she went to a swimming pool. Fun. She climbed up the ladder to dive in. So far, so good. The person ahead of her jumped in as she was right behind at the top of the ladder. And as the person ahead of her jumped into the pool, the structure collapsed, and Liba, who was 10 feet above the ground, fell to her death. She told me the story many years later, and it's interesting. So Liba fell and broke her head. And as this happened, she found herself hovering above her body and above the pool, looking down at everything that's going on. There is a body, and the head is broken, and there is blood around it, and people are screaming and running and calling for an ambulance. And she's cool. She's fine. It's, oh, look what happened there. All right, it's fine. And as the events below develop, Liba starts to rise higher and higher and travels through a tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, there is a light, and she exits the tunnel into a world of light. Liba found herself in front of a tribunal, a court of judges. And these judges were judging her not to decide whether she had had a good life or not a good life, rather to decide whether she was staying up there in that world or coming back to her body. And all the time, she's cool, she's fine, whatever you decide, whatever, who cares? So she says these judges were sitting in a U shape of chairs, like a semicircle of chairs, and the judges on the right side are in favor of her returning to life. And the judges on the left side are saying, well, she died. She came up here. She needs to stay. And they're going back and forth. Mind you, she does not understand their words. She understands the ideas. She says the words sounded like gibberish, like, but she understood what the ideas were. In the center, in between the two sides, there was a being of so much light that she said, I could not see who was within that light. But it seemed like it was like running the show. So anyways, the judges on the right side speak and on the left side speak and back and forth. And then, bang, the light entity in the center bangs. And with that bang, she understood the verdict is she's staying up. All right, she's staying up. At that moment, a new light came into that place. It was a light so bright, so brilliant, and yet she discerned who was within it. It was her grandmother, who had passed 5 years before. And she's shocked to see her grandmother again. And she said, my grandmother had more light than the sun. And my grandmother started crying and pleading and begging the judges to let me go back to my life. I didn't understand my grandmother either because she spoke Yiddish and I didn't. But I understood she was pleading my case. And one thing I understood, my grandmother said, over the kinder, which means about the children. She was begging for the children. Why did the grandmother have that incredible light? How did she get that incredible light? So Liba relates that her grandmother lived at the time of the Holocaust, but she lived in America. And she wanted very, very much to help all the Jews escaping Europe. So she would make it her business to find out whenever there was a ship coming from Europe to America, she would go to the port, she would wait for the people at the port, and when they came off of the ship, she would talk to them. She welcomed them with a smile and with warm words and with love in her heart. And she didn't have money to give them. She had no apartments for them or jobs for them. But she would comfort them and tell them, don't worry, this is not Europe. Here you will be safe. Nobody's trying to kill us. We will help you. You will find a job. You will find an apartment and things will be good. As years passed and the war was over, she didn't stop. In her later years, when her children were married and out of the house, her husband knew that if he comes home at night and his wife is not home, there is a hot dinner waiting for him inside the oven, and his wife, she is running around helping people. If somebody was sick, she would bring them food. If somebody was elderly, she would do their shopping. If somebody had given birth, she would come to the house and clean up and help with the other children. Whatever was needed, she was there to help. And that, my friends, is what gave Liba's grandmother that incredible light. Now, parenthesis, there is another near-death experience story in which another woman, I'm telling you as a parenthesis to explain Liba's grandmother, another woman died and she went to the other world and she met many other souls. As she saw all the other souls, she noticed that every soul had light, but not every soul had the same light. Some were very, very bright, some were average, and some were kind of dim. And she understood that the amount of light depended on the goodness that these people had done and the kindness that they had done throughout their lives. So this other woman, she says, as I was in that world watching everybody else, I looked at myself and I remember thinking, I wish I had more light. Just like people in this world sometimes think, I wish I had more money. People in that world think, I wish I had more light. But the thing is, as long as we are here, we can acquire as much light as we want. With every good thing we do, we acquire more light. Once we get there, that's it. Whatever you got, you got. So back to Liba and her grandmother. So the grandmother is pleading with the judges in the high court in heaven, and after she's finished talking, the judges reconsidered Liba's case. Those on the right side spoke again, and the ones on the left side spoke again. And the entity of light in the center banged again. And with that bang, as that bang happened, Liba said, I felt myself pulled downwards, down, 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 down. And I opened my eyes inside my body in the hospital as doctors were finishing to sew up my head. I met Liba many years after she had the experience. She was in Toronto. She lives in Toronto. And she told me the story twice. And I got to know Liba, and I saw that she's incredibly kind. And she's always thinking of others and giving to others. For instance, one time she gave me a ride to a shir, and I see in her car there are shopping bags with school supplies. And I said, Liba, your kids are all grown up. Why do you have school supplies? And she says, my neighbor's kids are starting school this week, and my neighbors can't afford to buy the school supplies for their children. I did not want the children to start school and be embarrassed that they don't have what they need for school. So I went and got it for them. Now I know that Liba didn't have enough money for herself, and she was taking out of what she didn't have to give to others. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה bidvaro. And this is a common pattern of people who have had a near-death experience. As they come back to life, they are so changed, they are so transformed, they are on fire with love for humanity, and they are obsessed with being helpful and kind and helping others. So then one day, not much longer after I heard this story, my kids bring me the phone. I still was living in Toronto. My children bring me the phone as I'm cooking dinner, and they say, "Mom, it's for you." And I pick up the phone, and somebody says, "Is this Mrs. Freeman?" "Yes, it is." "I'm calling you from Jerusalem, but he's speaking English." "Okay, very nice. I had a near-death experience. Do you want to hear?" "Of course I want to hear." So I turn off the fire so I don't burn down the house. I tell the children, eat a banana. Dinner has been postponed and rescheduled. I grab my notebook and my pen, and I run upstairs in my room, and I lock the door. The kids are eating bananas. It's okay. So this man tells me, when I was 17 years old, I had a near-death experience. The truth is, he spoke to me for an hour on the phone, but we don't have that kind of time. I'll tell you the main points. He says he was 17 years old, and he was an American in Israel going to a school for English-speaking kids, finishing high school in Israel. And his best friend was going back to his country of origin because he had graduated a year before. And 30 kids from the English-speaking high school in Israel go to the airport to say goodbye to this one guy. And he says, as we are waiting for the departure, there is an announcement on the loudspeakers, and the announcement is all flights canceled because of the war. This is Israel. It was the Yom Kippur War in the 70s. All flights canceled. Now, that was at a time when you did not get this kind of notifications. This did not exist. So the boy who's supposed to be traveling says, "I'm staying in the airport, and whenever my flight goes, I'll be here already." So all the 30 teenagers say, "Okay, we're staying too." So they got their guitars and their drums, and to the delight of the other older passengers, they're all making a party in the airport. And our hero, we are going to nickname him Eli because he does not want his name revealed. Liba said, "No problem, you can tell everybody my name." This man said, "I don't want anyone to know who I am." We call him Eli. Eli says, "I did not want to fall asleep. So when I got tired, I started pacing back and forth so I don't fall asleep." And one of my friends says, "Eli, why are you pacing back and forth like a lion in a cage?" And I'm like, "I don't want to fall asleep. When he leaves, I want to be here to see him off." So my friend puts his hand in his pocket and pulls out a little box of pills and says, "Here, Eli, these are diet pills. This is the 70s, okay? You're all too young to remember this. But this is the 70s, and they had diet pills, and today they're illegal because people died from them." So he gives him the pills and he says, "Take this, it will keep you awake." It's like taking, 10 cups of coffee plus some amphetamines, whatever. So Ellie says, "Oh, thank you very much." He has no clue what this is. He takes 2 pills, and a few minutes later, he's so awake and alert. This is great. This is a miracle drug. I should have known about this before. And he takes 2 pills, and he's so happy. And a few hours pass, and he doesn't need to sleep. But a few hours later, he's tired again. So then he says, "Oh, no problem. I had the box in my pocket." He pulls it out. He takes another 2 pills. The flight was postponed for 2.5 days. And our hero keeps on popping pills every few hours. Every time he's tired, he takes another 2 pills. After 2 days, you know what? He wasn't feeling very well. So he says, "Oh, I'm not feeling really well. I better sit down." And he does. He sits on a chair, and as he does, he realizes he can't breathe. So he wants to call for help. He wants his friends to call a doctor, an ambulance, something, but he can't breathe. When you can't breathe, you can't talk. So he can't. And next thing you know, says Ellie, I am looking at my friends and my body from up there. I'm up by the ceiling, looking down at all my friends and my own body sitting on the chair. It looks like it's asleep, but I know that I'm by the ceiling. And then everything goes black. Complete darkness. a darkness so thick that you can touch it, you can feel it. And he says, I was afraid. No parentheses. In near-death experiences, the people who have them usually relate that the feelings they have when leaving the body are feelings of calm, peace, joy, love, and everything's wonderful. So fear is not a common element of near-death experiences. It's outstanding that Ellie had fear in the darkness. The darkness is usually comforting. So Ellie says, I remember that when I was in grade 2 in the United States of America, I had a rabbi for a teacher, and he taught us, if you are ever in big trouble, you should say, Baruch Shem Kivod Machuso Leolam Vaed. So he says, I remember that, and without a mouth, in my spirit form, I am saying, Baruch Shem Kivod Machuso Leolam Vaed, over and over again. And then I see, far, far, far away, there is a pinpoint of light, and I start zooming at a high rate of speed towards the light. And as I'm approaching it, the light point gets bigger, and I'm exiting the darkness into a world of beautiful light. I found myself in front of what people call, who had this experience, the living light, or the loving living light. It's an entity of light that they understand to be alive. They understand that it gives them unconditional and infinite love. And they understand this to be the creator. So Eli, who is a Jewish person, calls it the Shekhinah, the divine presence. He says, if you want to know what the feeling was when I was in the presence of the Shekhinah, of the living, loving light, he says, do this. And I invite you to do the same. Think about every happy experience you had in your entire life. Put together all the joy you ever had. Make one big package of joy and happiness. Are you with me in the experience? So far, so good. All your happiness together, one big package. Multiply it by 1,000,000. That was my feeling when I was in front of the living, loving light, which I understood to be the creator. How long was I there? I have no idea. There is no time in that world. There is no feeling of time. There is no passing of time. I was just there. And then after a certain measure of unmeasured time, bang, I'm gone. And I'm somewhere else. Where am I now? I find myself in that world, in another space where I meet with other souls, which I never knew in my lifetime, but I recognized them nonetheless. They were my grandparents who were killed in the Holocaust. So as I meet my grandparents, they gave me love. Love is a big deal over there. They gave me love and I gave them love, and we were so happy to be together. It was sort of like some spiritual bodiless embrace. I don't know how long I was there either, but there, bang, I'm gone. I'm in another space, and I'm in front of the court, the tribunal. And in front of this court, I had my life review. The life review and the living, loving light are the two most profoundly impactful elements of a near-death experience. Because when a person experiences a life review, they are seeing their life from birth to death with every detail in action, in words, and even in thoughts. So this is very powerful. And as Eli explained it to me, he said, not only did I relive all my life, but I relived it from the perspective of others, meaning every emotion I caused another person was coming to me now. So I was feeling all the joy I caused others. Every time I did an act of kindness, every time I helped someone, every time I smiled at someone and was kind to them, and I caused them to be happy or comforted or warm, I got that feeling back to myself. And if I ever caused somebody any kind of grief, then I felt that as well. So luckily for Eli, he was a nice guy. And in his 17 years, he had been a pretty good guy. So he says, I saw my whole life, but then there was one thing that was highlighted, that was stressed like, pay attention. This is it. This is the best thing you ever did. And what was it that Eli did? He says, in my school, there were bullies who were bullying the younger children and the weaker children. And I stood up for them. I stood up to the bullies to defend the weaker children. And that showed in my life review as the best thing I had ever done. And then my life review comes to an end, and I'm like, that's it? But what about my parents? What about my sisters? I'm only 17 years old. There is so much I want to do with my life. And as I say those words, I reopen my eyes, and I'm inside my body in the airport, trying to figure out what just happened. Was that a dream? Did I fall asleep? No, I remember not being able to breathe. Was that a hallucination because of the pills? He says, no, that world feels like that is the real world. And the world in which we live with our bodies, that is the dream. The temporary thing, when we get there, it's like, we're coming home. This is the real thing. So I was pretty sure that this was not a dream and it was not a hallucination, but a very, very powerful and real experience. So I get up from my seat, and my friends didn't even realize what happened to me, but one of them comes over to me and whispers in my ear. And my friend whispers in my ear, Ellie, what just happened to you? Don't share it with anybody. Don't tell anybody. Not now. Maybe many years from now, but not now. And that's why Eli doesn't want people to know his name. He feels he's not supposed to share that. And then he says, I'm walking around, and for the first time in my life, I see people's auras. I see the energy around people's bodies. And most people have a red aura. One man has a dark aura. And then there is one old, little Taimani, a Yemenite man, and his aura is pure white silver light. So Ellie says, my experience changed my life profoundly. After the experience, he says, I have not shared the experience with anyone except for my wife, my Rebbe, and you. And he says now, he's slightly older than me. He says, now my friends make fun of me. I'm a successful businessman, and my friends say to me, Ellie, you're so silly. You're always running around looking for another mitzvah to do. Stay a little bit longer in your office. You'll make more money. And I'm like, money? Money is so temporary. I want something that will last me forever. And I know, because I know when I was there, I saw that every mitzvah I do is a diamond that's mine forever. How could I give that up for money? So scientists were very curious about near-death experiences, and they were wondering whether they are dreams, hallucinations, or a product of the brain being deprived of oxygen. So I have a friend who's a neuroscientist, and she said to me, I can explain to you everything scientifically about how a near-death experience happens, but I know that near-death experiences are real because my mother had one. So scientists really wanted to know what's going on. So in the 1970s, Dr. Raymond Moody was the first scientist to publish a book about near-death experiences. The book is called Life After Life. It's a fun book, recommended reading. In 1975, he published his book, Life After Life, about NDEs. And Dr. Raymond Moody interviewed 100 subjects who had had a near-death experience. And he found the pattern was that people would find themselves hovering above their bodies, traveling through a tunnel, exiting the tunnel, meeting dead relatives, sometimes meeting what they call beings of light, which we can call angels sometimes. A few lucky ones get, but not everybody, get to meet with a special living, loving light entity, which they understand to be God. Even those who were atheists and did not believe in God, after the experience would change their opinion. So Dr. Moody published his book, Life After Life, with the reports of those patterns that he found in people. So most people have, but not all. In other words, there are rules, but there are also exceptions. And not everybody goes through the tunnel, but the very great majority does. Not everybody has a life review, but about half of the people have the life review, and so on. It depends how long a person has been out of their body, how much they get to experience. So if somebody was dead for longer, they will come back with more memories. In the 1990s, two cardiologists decided that they wanted to research this topic and do their own findings. And Dr. Pim van Lommel in Holland spent a year interviewing, as a cardiologist, he had lots of dead patients. So interviewing every patient who had had a cardiac arrest and was resuscitated. And he asked them not to be concerned about sharing, because he says, I will believe you. You see, up until the 1970s, when Dr. Moody published his books, people who had near-death experiences were told by their family, don't tell anybody because people will think you are crazy and they will lock you up. So they were told not to share until Dr. Moody did his research and published his book. In the 1990s, these two doctors would tell their patients who had been resuscitated to share if they had had an experience. So not every person who had a cardiac arrest had the experience, but a reasonable number of them did. And Dr. Pim van Lommel in Holland and Dr. Michael Sabomium, Atlanta, Georgia, both had the same findings a few years apart and an ocean in between. They found the same patterns happening with their patients. So scientists began to be interested and believe in their experience. And what about Torah? So we find that in our Talmud, 2,000 years old, there is also a record of a near-death experience, one or two of them. So in the tractate Pesachim, Masechta Pesachim, page 50, it's told the story of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, whose son was very ill, and the father, a Talmudic scholar, was sitting next to his son's bed, and the son died. The father continued sitting next to the child, to his son's bed, not the child, but his child's bed. And a few moments later, the son came spontaneously back to life. So the father asked him, he was curious. He said, what did you see? Maraita, what did you see? He wanted to know. You were dead, you went somewhere, something happened? And the son said, Olam hafuch ra'iti. I saw an upside down world. What is an upside down world? He said, those who were very honored and respected and special in this world were not necessarily so in the spiritual world. And some people who were completely ignored in the physical world sometimes were on the very, very top in the spiritual world, because the values are so different. In that world, money and career and fame are not so big, but kindness and learning and doing good, whoa, that's amazing. So the other thing he said is, I also heard a voice that said, Ashrei mi sheba lekan betalmudo beyado. Lucky is the one who comes here to the upper world and his learning is in their hands. In other words, that while they were here, they used their lifetime to learn and to grow. So now we've gone through the scientists, we've gone through the Talmud. And in regards to learning, one time I heard an amazing story specific to learning. So again, back to Toronto. Rabbi Mendel Glukovsky was a rabbi from Toronto, and he moved to the land of Israel and opened a Chabad center in Rehovot. So, of course, he's an English-speaking person. And one day, an elderly lady came to him and said, her name was Sarah, and said, Rabbi, you know, because it's Israel, there are so many Torah classes, but I moved here, you know, in an advanced age, and I couldn't learn Hebrew. So I can't go to any Torah classes because they're all in Hebrew. You speak English, so will you give us a Torah class in English? So the rabbi said, well, I'll tell you what, Sarah, you organize the class and I will teach it. Deal. So Sarah went and picked up her phone and called every person she knew who spoke English and told them, we are having a Torah class in English for all the English speakers and we would love for you to come. And the people came and they had a class, and every Monday at 7:30, Rabbi Glukowski gave the English speakers a Torah class in English organized by Sarah. The people became friends. They had their own Hanukkah party and their own Purim party. If they had problems, they would come to the rabbi, and all this because Sarah organized it. After a number of years, Sarah came to the rabbi one day and said, Rabbi, I came to say goodbye. Oh, Sarah, where are you going? Well, I'm too old, can't live alone anymore. I'm moving to Tel Aviv with my son. He will take care of me. So, goodbye. Oh, we'll miss you, Sarah. Keep in touch. Okay, goodbye. 2 years passed and he heard nothing from Sarah. One day his phone rings. It's a man. Is this Rabbi Glukowski? Yes, who's calling? I'm Sarah's son. Remember Sarah? Of course I remember Sarah. How is your mother? Silence. It turns out the man's mother, the Sarah who organized this shiur, had a medical event and she was unconscious in a coma in the hospital for 2 days. And the man says to Rabbi Glukowski, today my mother came to, she opened her eyes and she asked for you. She said, where is Rabbi Glukowski? And I was shocked. And she's asking for you, Rabbi, would you come see her? The doctors don't think she will last to tomorrow. Of course. So Rabbi Glukowski says to the secretary, cancel all my appointments for today. He jumps in his car, he drives to Tel Aviv, he comes into the hospital, he walks into the room, and there on the bed is a very old, very frail, little old Sarah in her last hours. And when the rabbi comes in, Sarah smiles. He says, thank you for coming, Rabbi. Oh, Sarah, how are you feeling? Who cares, feeling, schmealing? He says, Rabbi, in the past 2 days, I have already gone to the other world and back. When I was there, they showed me my crown. The topic is stylish these days. They showed me my crown, and the centerpiece stone, the centerpiece jewel in my crown is the Monday night Torah class in English. So, Rabbi, I wanted to talk to you, to ask you, please don't stop the Monday Torah class in English that I started. Now the rabbi needed resuscitation because he had never heard of somebody going back and forth. It was very new for him. So he collected himself and he assured Sarah that as long as people are coming, there will be a Torah class in English. And he left, and Sarah did not see the next morning. But she left us with such an incredible gift to know what's awaiting for us, for all our good deeds, and for all our learning and helping others learn in the other world. So we spoke about the importance of kindness. Every mitzvah is a jewel. Torah learning is so powerful and helping others learn. But sometimes after I speak, people come over and say to me, but what about me? I didn't live my life this way. What am I supposed to do now? So I have one story that shows us the power of changing. So this is a story that I read about a woman who had a medical event that caused her to die, and she went to the other world and she had a slightly different experience. Instead of seeing her life review as a movie like everybody else, she got to the other world, saw an old man with a long white beard and flowing robes holding a book. And when you are in that world, you don't need people to tell you things, you just know. You are uploaded with knowledge. So she says, I knew as I saw the old man that the book is the story of my life. So I asked him, can I look at the book? And he gave me the book, and I opened it, and it was white pages written in gold color, in gold ink. And I'm reading, and I'm like, yeah, this is the story of my life. This is true. I remember this. And then I'm flipping the pages, and I see that there are whole paragraphs missing. So I look up, and I ask the old man, why are there paragraphs missing from the story of my life? And he smiles, and he says to me, those are things you did that were wrong, but you took steps to correct them. They have been deleted from your life story. So Torah, kindness, teshuvah, and prayer. So there was a Rabbi Gajzinski, who not many years ago had a near-death experience. Quite extraordinary. Rabbi Gajzinski is a Chabad rabbi in Great Neck, New York. And he was sick, and I remember that there was a request of prayers for him, and I was one of the people praying for him. I didn't know him, but there was a request of Tehillim, so I said Tehillim. And then on Hanukkah, he had several health issues combined, and he was not old. And on Hanukkah, he had a cardiac arrest. He was rushed to the hospital, and he was dead for 40 minutes. That's 40. Now, usually doctors will not continue resuscitation efforts after 15, 20 minutes, because if the brain was deprived of oxygen, if the person comes back to life, they could just be a vegetable. But, this case, there was a doctor in the team resuscitating that was a close friend of the family. And he said, I could not get myself to step out of the room and tell the family that we gave up. So we kept resuscitation efforts for 40 minutes. What was happening in the meantime with this person? So when he came back to life, at first he would not talk to anybody about what happened. But then it was hard to keep the secret. So he told his son. At first he told his son, don't tell anybody. Then he told his family, told them, don't tell anybody. And now I'm going to tell you, and don't tell anybody, okay? So he says, as he exited his body, an entity came and introduced himself. I am Michael Hamalach. I am Michael, the angel. And I came to escort you on your trip. And I'm like, oh, cool. And we go up, and he gave me the tour, the grand tour. So he says he took me to the palace of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses who gave us the Torah. And he took me to the palace of his brother Aaron, the first Kohen Gadol, the first high priest. And then he took me to all the great sages, not all, but lots of them. And as we're going through the Talmud, and we're going through history and seeing the amazing places where these souls are residing. And then we got to the Baal Shem Tov, because this man who had a near-death experience is a Chabad rabbi. So he went to the Baal Shem Tov and to the following Hasidic leaders, and he's going down the line of Chabad Rebbes, visiting them. And in the middle of this royal, amazing tour, the angel says to him, oh, we have to go. We have to go? Yes, the high court, the heavenly court is waiting for us, and we're not allowed to keep them waiting. Okay, we go. So they go, the angel takes him, and they go to the heavenly court. And Rabbi Gajzinski has a very outstanding experience. The heavenly court says to him, we're not sure what to do with you. We're not sure whether we should keep you here or send you back. What do you think? So Rabbi Gajzinski says, my whole life, I never made an important decision without asking my Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I can't decide without asking my Rebbe. So as he says these words, the light comes in that space. Can't say a room because there are no walls. The light comes into that space, and the Rebbe walks in, and he says, when he tells the story, he says, When the Rebbe came into the heavenly court, all the judges stood up as if, no, they don't have bodies, but they sort of stood up to show him respect. And the Rebbe pointed at me and said, I began the journey to bring Mashiach. I began the work of bringing Mashiach. The Rebbe said, pointing at Rabbi Gajzinski, he is one of my soldiers. I need him in the world doing my work to bring Mashiach. And then the heavenly court said the name, the full name and his mother's name of the rabbi. And with that they declared, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, is declared to go back to his body. And they sent him back. One of the things that you related that I heard from a very close friend of his, that Rabbi Gajzinski told it to his very close friend, and his friend told it to me one time when I gave this lecture at a Pesach retreat. He said, while I was there, people were praying for me. He said, I heard every voice and every word of prayer that was being said for me. He said it in Hebrew, Shamati kol mila v'mila v'kol kol v'kol. I heard every word and every voice of the people praying for me. In connection to this, there was another person who also had a near-death experience and who related that as they were above, they looked down and they saw planet Earth. And a voice told them, look at the Earth. See the points of light? Now, you know when you are landing on the airplane and you're coming down to a city at night and from high up you see the little points of light? So he saw planet Earth with little dots of light, but not too many. The voice told this person, in every spot where there is a light, there is a person praying. And then the whole earth lit up like a ball of fire, and the voice said, if everyone would pray, it would look like this. And the whole earth was alight. And then the lights went off again, and just the little dots remained. And the voice said, but it's not so. Just a few people are praying. There are many things we learn from near-death experiences. The most important ones are how to live our lives, but there are other messages as well. One of the messages is that the Creator has infinite and unconditional love. Infinite and unconditional love for every single one of us. Another one is that life is eternal. Life in this world is just a brief illusion. It's just a brief travel to get to our real destination, which is that world, which the near-death experiences called home. They said, when I was traveling to that world, I felt like I was going home. Another thing we learned is as follows. Part of the experience that many of these people had was meeting with relatives or friends that had passed before them, and on meeting them, they were doing this. Go back, it's not your time. They were telling them, go back, it's not your time. This was a very common pattern in near-death experiences. And the message here is very important, which is, when is the time, and nobody departs at the wrong time. Everybody has an assigned number of years, months, days, and minutes before they are born. And if they go and it's not their time, they are sent back and told it's not your time. And even children have near-death experiences. I'm just checking the minutes, but it's gone. Okay. There is a story of a little boy called Glauco in Brazil. And this boy had a mom and a dad and two brothers. And one day the father goes fishing. So the mom says, take the kids. And the dad says, take them fishing? What is taking fishing for? I need it quiet. The mom says, it's good for the kids to spend time with their father. Take the kids. Fine, take the kids. But be careful with the river. Watch the kids well. Yeah, okay. So they go to the river, and the father starts fishing, and no fish bite. So he says to the 3 boys, I'm going to go further down the river, follow me. But as he goes down the bank of the river, he's preoccupied with other things, and he's not looking at the 3 boys. The boys were around 11, 10, and 8 years old, or 10, 8, and 7. Our hero is 8 years old. So the father is going ahead, and he says to the boys, don't go in the river. The water is too fast. Don't go in the river. You know kids who listen to the parents? So the oldest boy says, oh, the river looks so good. There is a bush. If I hold on to the bush, the water won't drive me away, won't wash me away. So the first boy holds on to, the father goes down, the boys are behind him, the oldest boy holds on to the bush and puts his feet in the water, goes in the water, and whoosh, he's washed away. Glauco, who is the middle boy, he's 8 years old, he says, I followed my brother. And before you know it, all 3 boys were drowning. So Glauco says, an angel came to pick me up, and he took me, and we're going up, and the angel showed me my life, all 8 years. And in my life, I saw everything that happened, and I felt all the feelings that I caused others, even though he's 8 years old. And he says, one thing that happened was that one day I had a key, and I came home, and my neighbor's car was parked outside. I took my key, and as a boy who doesn't know very well what he's doing and not thinking much, I made designs on the paint of the car with my key. I made a picture and destroyed the paint of the car. In my near-death experience, after I went home after doing this, I remained outside, and I saw when my neighbor, the owner of the car, came and found his car damaged, and I felt in my being his anguish and his anxiety because his car had been scratched and it would cost so much money to repair it. And then I followed my neighbor as he went into his house and told his wife what he had just found. And I felt her anxiety and her distress. And I looked at the angel and I said, but I'm only 8 years old. And the angel smiled and said, these are just lessons. It was not a punishment. The angel was just showing him what happens. But then came the good stuff. The good stuff was that Glauco went to the park, and in the park there was a homeless little boy the same age as him. Unfortunately, this is very common in Brazil. I grew up in Argentina, neighbors with Brazil. So Glauco says, I was playing with this other boy who's my age, and I noticed that his clothes were torn, and he looked kind of dirty, and he was very, very hungry. So I asked him, you don't have any food? And he told me that his parents had abandoned him and he was alone and he was homeless. So I said to him, come to my house, my mom will feed both of us. And I took him home, and my mom made us both take a shower, and I shared my clothes with him. I gave him some of my clothes to wear. And then my mom gave both of us a warm meal. All this because I brought him home. So as I'm seeing this now in my experience, I'm feeling in myself all the happiness, all the joy, all the warmth, all the comfort that this little boy felt because I took care of him. Okay, so the experience is over, and the angel says to me, you have to go back. And I said, I don't want to go back. Most people don't want to go back because the other world is very beautiful. It's a world of light and comfort and love, and it's amazing. And people are very, very happy to be there. When they're told to go back, they say no. So Glauco is 8 years old, and he's told by the angel to go back, and he says, no, I don't want to go back. But the angel says, if you don't go back, your mother will be devastated at losing 3 children at once. And he showed me what mother would feel like if I didn't go back. So then I surrendered to the angel, and I agreed to go back. And with that, I felt myself pushed out of the water. I was pushed out of the water, and I took a deep breath, and there was police searching for me and for my brothers and other people too, and somebody yelled, "Look, the boys are there." And somebody else answered, "That can't be them. They've been underwater for 20 minutes. It's not possible that they are them." And my father came and recognized us, and we went home. Finally, there is another important message that I have learned from near-death experiences. Some people, when they found themselves in front of the living, loving light, they were asked a question. The question they were asked was, "What did you do with the life I gave you?" So once in a while I stop to think about that question. What am I doing with the life that's given me? Because the light asks us that question. What did you do with the life I gave you? It's a chance, it's an opportunity for us to do all those wonderful things. My father passed away suddenly. He did not have a near-death experience. He had a misdiagnosed appendicitis, and he was treated in the hospital for 10 days with intravenous antibiotics, but his appendix had ruptured, and the infection spread. And by the time the doctor decided to give him surgery, the infection there was sepsis already. Anyways, the next day he passed away, right after Shabbos. He had the surgery on Friday, and he passed away right after Shabbos. I'm an only daughter with one brother, and as a daughter I was very close to my father. I did not expect him to die at 55 years old, and I felt that I never had the opportunity to say goodbye. So at the Shloshim, that's 30 days after the burial, after everyone left the cemetery, I stayed next to my father's grave, and I did something that you're not supposed to do. So don't do this at home, ladies. I asked my father, "I want to see you again." I said to him, "I don't know if they will allow you or if this is possible, but I would really like to see you again." Why this is not okay to do? At the time I didn't know, but I found out later that you're not supposed to ask the dead to come and visit you, and it's painful for the soul to come back to the physical world, so we shouldn't disturb them. Once they have left, and if they want to contact us, it's up to them, but we should not ask them. I had heard stories of dreams when people had a dream of their grandparents or their aunt or somebody who came in a dream and gave them a message from the world beyond. And so I expected a dream. I went to sleep that night hoping for a dream. I woke up in the morning, there was no dream. I said maybe it takes longer. I waited 1, 2, 3 days, a whole week. It's not happening. I gave up. I mentioned Toronto, and Atlanta was mentioned. We were living in Vancouver. We lived in a lot of places. We were living in Vancouver. I had just given birth to my third child. I was a very busy mom of 3 children aged 3 and under, also teaching. And after a week passed and nothing happened, I said, "Okay, not happening. Gonna go back to my life and my business." So I forgot about it. A couple of months passed. There was a rabbi in Los Angeles, Rabbi Shmuel David Reichik. He was the first rabbi that the Lubavitcher Rebbe sent to the west coast of the United States as his emissary. And something had happened in Vancouver. We needed a pick-me-up. And this rabbi was brought to give an inspirational talk to our community. So we are all the ladies sitting in the big hall of the Chabad house. There is a U shape of chairs. The rabbi is standing in the center of that circle of chairs, and I'm sitting across from the rabbi at the other end. It was a big hall, it was far. In the middle of the rabbi's talk, with no previous warning whatsoever, my father, who had passed away 2 or 3 months before, popped in the room. I was completely shocked and very emotional because he had just passed. I felt the tears going down my cheeks Nobody else saw him. Nobody knew what I was crying. They thought the rabbi's words are very emotional and I'm very inspired and I'm crying. I saw my father all the way at the other end of the room, hovering. It was a very high ceiling, hovering closer to the ceiling than to the floor. And after a little bit of time, I calmed down and I accepted, yes, this is my father. I see him very clearly as I see the people in their bodies right here. But at the same time, I knew that if I would have gotten up from my chair and walked across the room and stretched out my hand, I knew there's nothing to touch. It's a spirit. When I calmed down, my father gave me his message. His message was, he called me by my name and he said, Nomi, do as many mitzvahs as you can because Mashiach is coming soon. And that was it. That was his message. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what I asked for. It was what he wanted to tell me. He wanted his daughter, who he loves so much, to know that mitzvahs are what really counts. And he wants that when my time comes, or rather when Mashiach time comes, to come down into the world, and we are all going to be enjoying the fruits of our hard work, he wants me to be wealthy with that light. So he told me, do as many mitzvahs as you can, because Mashiach is coming soon. And so, ladies, before we open for questions, I'm going to leave you with two powerful thoughts. A question: what did you do with the life I gave you from him? And advice from my father: do as many mitzvahs as you can, because Mashiach is coming soon. May it be right now. We can have questions. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much. You said that your days are numbered. It's predetermined before you come into this world. How many days, hours you're going to have, and how do we know that?
Okay, we know that in two ways.
Excuse me, please repeat the questions for the recording.
The question is, how do we know that we have an predetermined amount of years and days and hours before we are born? How do we know that? So we know that in two ways. One is from the near-death experiences, because the people who died and were sent back, they were told, go back, it's not your time. So then we see that every person has their time. And if it's not their time, it's not their time. That's from one perspective. And the other perspective is because the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us. There is a letter from the Rebbe to people who were grieving, and the Rebbe told them that the amount of time that a person lives is predetermined. So that whoever it was that had passed away, that they had lived the amount of time they were meant to live. And the main thing is that we use every moment and every day for our purpose in life. Any other questions? Yes.
What inspired you? Like, what age, and how did you come to speak about this?
It's fun, no? Okay, the question is, what inspired me to get into this and speak about it? So, when the first book, Life After Life, was published, I was a little girl. I saw a summary of this book in the Reader's Digest. That's all that was available to me. I read it and I thought it was very interesting. Fast forward many years, when I was married, in the early years of my marriage, the New York Times published an article about near-death experiences, talking about a nurse who had a patient who had cardiac arrest, and so the patient died, and then she knew what she needed to do. She needed to inject the patient with a certain drug, but she didn't have it. So she ran to the pharmacy and she left the patient. She ran out of the room. She went to the elevator. The elevator was busy. She ran down the stairs to the pharmacy in the hospital. She ran into the pharmacy. She called the pharmacist by their first name, asked for this drug by its name, said, I'll pay you later, grabbed the drug, ran in. Then she saw the elevator, took the elevator up the stairs, got to the patient, took a syringe, took the medicine, injected the patient, and the patient was resuscitated. The next day, the patient said to the nurse, "Thank you so much for saving my life." And the nurse says, "How do you know? It was me, you were dead." And he was still unconscious after he was resuscitated. So the patient went on to tell the nurse, "I trusted you. So when I was out of my body and you came in my room, I followed you. I followed you down the hall and down the stairs and into the pharmacy, and you called the pharmacist and this name, and you asked for, and he said the name of the medication. And then you came out and the elevator was there, so you took the elevator up, and then you injected me with this drug, and I was pulled back into my body." So I thought this was very interesting. Fast forward some more years after that, and my husband came home one day with a book called God, Rationality, and I forgot, by Dr. Block. And Dr. Block was a Lubavitcher Baal Tshuva who was a professor of philosophy at the University of London, Ontario. And he wrote a book to prove the existence of God. The book is about this thick, and 1/3 of the book is all about near-death experiences. Because the people who had near-death experiences many of them are witnessing the existence of God. So I read that book, at least the part about the NDEs. And then I read it again. And when I was finished, I read it another couple of times. And I found it very, very interesting. So then I said, why keep good knowledge and important information to myself when this could be shared? So I was already doing public speaking years ago, and I decided to share this information. And the more I share it, the better it is. And I'm encouraging you that you should also share it so that everybody will know what life is all about and live a purposeful and gainful life. So that's what inspired me, to help others to do the same.
Can you please repeat the name of the book?
I can hear?
Can you please repeat the name of the book?
So it's Dr. Block. I believe that the book is out of print. It's Dr. Block is the author. God, Rationality, and Mysticism. I remember it. God, Rationality, and Mysticism. You found it?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
And it's not out of print. Okay, everybody should get it. You can all read it.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes.
Jews and non-Jews have different death experiences.
Good question. Do Jews and no-Jews have different near-death experiences? Very interesting. Yes and no. The majority of the experience begins the same way. So the beginning of the experience is the same. Basically hovering above the body, traveling to a world of light, seeing dead relatives, angels, and so on. A life review. So far, it's all the same. Now, I interviewed many people who had near-death experiences, pretty much all Jewish, because that's who I have access to, pretty much. And I have read thousands of accounts of people who had a near-death experience. So the main difference that I found is basically two things. One is the Beis Din, or heavenly court or tribunal, I only found mostly with Jewish people. But not every Jewish person who had a near-death experience spoke about a tribunal. Maybe it's later on in the experience, I don't know. The other thing is that non-Jews are only expected to believe in God and basically treat others well, do acts of kindness, be kind to humans, to animals, even to plants, basically to be a mensch, a good person, to believe in God and to be kind. That's basically live a moral life. That's all that's expected. But for Jews, I found that the keeping of mitzvahs is required as well. The most powerful evidence for this is my father's message that he gave me: do as many mitzvahs as you can, and also from many other people's experiences, like the lady who organized the Torah class, and people who saw that each mitzvah was like a diamond, and so on. So those are the main differences. That's a good question. All questions are good questions. Yeah, both of you in whatever order.
So my question, I've thought about this before. What is, like halakhically, what is considered death? Like you said, like, if someone was resuscitated,
Yeah.
So are they dead before that? Like before they're resuscitated,
Yeah.
halachically are they dead? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. Because if they're dead, if they come back to life, are they married to their spouse anymore?
Oh, that's a good
And if their
question.
husband is a Kohen, can they be actually married to them now?
That's a very good question. Okay, so the answer is that each individual case should be judged by a rabbi individually. And we can make a blanket statement about that. But what's interesting is that, in regards to your question, is that Rabbi Gajzinski said that, I'm pretty sure it was Rabbi Gajzinski, said that the angel told him when there is a possibility of return to the body, we leave a small amount of life force in the body so it can be resuscitated.
I've heard that part.
You heard that? Good. Yes. Whoop.
I haven't thought about this a lot, so maybe so we're assuming that the light that a person receives from doing all the mitzvahs, it sounds kind of hierarchical once you're there.
Yeah.
You have more light, this person has less light. They did more mitzvahs, this person has less mitzvahs. It's both. Why?
That's why I'm here tonight.
Like why, I understand the concept of a mitzvah and having light.
Yes.
But why, then what? So this one is more light, this one is less light.
So what does it mean if they have more
Can't
light
you
or
just
less light?
be even there? Just can't, like, take
Okay.
it one more level, take it one more step further.
Okay, so you want me to develop the hierarchy?
Well, if
Or you're asking for
saying-
justice?
If you're saying there's a hierarchy, which sounds like this. Why?
Basically, you get the dividends of your investment. You get payment for your work and for your investment. But I just said something on the tip of my tongue.
Your investment here for
One
there.
one person who had a near-death experience related that when they got to the other world, they said, "Have you ever seen a coin sorter? You know, you have a charity box, and then you want to sort the coins. You can do it manually, or you can put them in this machine that's a coin sorter. So you put all the coins, and this device is designed so that the quarters go this way, and the nickels this way, and the dimes that way, according to their size, right? So, so one person who came back from a near-death experience said everybody falls exactly where they belong, just like in a coin sorter. According to what you did, that's the place you get.
And keep going then, what does that mean? So you're at this place and another person's at that place, and so?
So you have I'll put it in one sentence that I read, and it's anonymous. I don't know who the author is. The sentence goes, life is the time God gives us to decide how we will spend forever after. So we are given a certain amount of years. We hope for 120, but whatever we get. And that's the time that God gives us to determine, for us to choose how we will spend forever after. But there is also things we can do for those who passed away. So while we are here, we can achieve as much as we can. And for those who passed, so we can bring them merit and we can help them rise. So if somebody already passed, we can give tzedakah in their merit, we can do Torah classes in their merit, and so on, so that they can rise higher and higher. Because once they are there, they can't do anything. But those of us who are still here, we can do for them.
But that's my question. Once you're there, then what is the point of hierarchy? What's the point? This one has more lights than that one.
It's like an upgrade. It's like an upgrade.
Does a soul with more light have a better eternity than
Absolutely.
And if so, what do you mean
That
by
yes,
that? What do you
absolutely.
mean by that then?
One of the things that I learned from near-death experiences is that very common to all NDEers is that they say, the experience is impossible to describe with words, because in this world we don't have what we have in that world. So because we don't have that, we don't have the vocabulary to describe it. But yes, there is a hierarchy. I knew a woman when we just moved to Toronto, from Vancouver to Toronto. They asked me to give a Torah class in the merit of a certain lady who was very beloved in the Toronto community. Her name was Leah, and she was terminally ill, Rahman al-Islam. So every week, the women of the community got together, and we learned Torah in the merit of this lady. So I don't know, perhaps her life was somewhat extended, I don't know. But she did pass away a few years later. When I went to visit her daughter at the Shiva, the daughter said, I didn't know the woman personally because I had just moved to Toronto when she got ill, but I knew from the people in the community that this woman had done a tremendous amount of kindness, acts of kindness. One family who had children with health issues, and the children needed to eat and they weren't eating enough, so they told that this woman would go to the school, which was in another area of town, and she would sit at lunchtime with the children and read them storybooks so that they would eat more. And then one day, somebody mentioned that the children really like dairy lasagna, but they don't have a dairy oven. And the next day, they opened the front door, and there was a new oven, a new toaster oven, one of the big ones, at their door. So she did tremendous amount of kindness. Nobody knows how much kindness she did. So when I went to the Shiva to visit her daughter, I told her that I didn't know her mother very much, but from what I heard from the community, her mother must be in a very beautiful palace in the other world, because that's what I know about the other world. So the daughter said, I have a story to tell you. She said that 6 months before she passed away, her mother had a dream. And she did not want to tell the dream to her children, not to worry them, but she told the dream to her best friend. In her dream, she was going into another dimension, let's call it. She was going somewhere else, and someone, an entity that she did not see, took her and showed her a very beautiful place. And she was shown this beautiful room, and then this other very beautiful room, and then this other very beautiful room. And the entity told her, it's not your time yet, but when it is your time, this is where you are coming to. So the daughter told me that her mother had not wanted to tell her the dream while she was alive, and she told it to her best friend, and once her mother passed away, her mother's friend told it to her. So yes, people do build for themselves not just personal light, but a beautiful place. So we see from Leah that she built herself a beautiful place in the world to come. We see from the other stories that people have light, and we see from the story of Sarah that she had a beautiful crown. So there are upgrades. It's like you can stay in a 1-star hotel, in a 5-star hotel, or there are upgrades that you can have.
I think Jewish people aren't supposed to think like that. You're not supposed to be living your life here thinking where you're going to be in the future. That's like a Goyish thing that they don't, that's like, they are in fear all the time that they're going to go to hell.
Did you notice that I didn't mention the word hell?
Yeah, no, you didn't. I didn't.
Yes. So we are not living in fear. We are living in joy, because we know that we are building. And at the same, I talk about near-death experiences. My husband wrote a book called Bringing Heaven Down to Earth. So we're going in different ways. Yeah. So the idea is to bring heaven down to earth, not for earth to go up to heaven, but to bring heaven down to earth. But in the meantime, I find that there are many people who were not inspired to do certain things before, but after they found out about NDEs and what accompanies them, they are inspired to do it. So I agree with you. We should not live in fear. We should live in joy. And we should be inspired from the stories of other people to live a meaningful life and bring heaven down to earth. All the books. Yes. And then
There's a rabbi, Alona Nava. I don't know
Yes.
if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he talked about how he had his near-death experience, and it related to this whole thing of he realized he had not done anything nice or almost nothing nice for other people, or done any mitzvahs
Yeah.
before he died, because he noticed, he looked around and saw everyone else around him, and they all had like these points of light, and he had like nothing, and he just felt almost like naked, like he felt very self-conscious,
Yes.
and so I don't know if that like.
We
means
spoke
it-
together in Los Angeles.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it kind of relates back to this comment of this. It wasn't necessarily like he came back when he just said that he wanted to do more mitzvahs because he just wanted to have that light.
Yes.
So it wasn't a fear thing. It was like I don't know how to describe it, but yeah,
He wanted another chance.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so backtrack to what you're
Loud, please.
Okay, so backtracking to what you were saying, you were at your father's kever and you asked for him to come to you. And then you found out it wasn't okay. So you're saying like asking to have a dream or asking to have a day vision, or it's all the same thing?
It's all the same thing. They're both visits. It's not okay to disturb the people who went on to the other world and ask them to come back here, whether in a dream or in a vision. We don't do that.
What if you ask Hashem, I want to know if, this person is doing well in Shemayim, or like,
So the best thing that we can do is do things in their merit, because that's what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said, it's like when children go to summer camp, and the camp has rules. You can't call home because then the kids get so homesick and it makes problems for the camp. But you can send them care packages. So when we do mitzvahs in their merit, like give tzedakah, and for Torah institutions, for poor people in Israel, those are very powerful and very encouraged. When in their merit of these people who passed away, when you learn Torah in their merit, when you give tzedakah in their merit, when you do acts of kindness in their merit, those are care packages and they get upgrades.
say that you can't ask like a dream, you can't ask for a vision, like I would say.
Because it disturbs them. It disturbs their peace. It's this. Yeah, you're not supposed to. Yeah. Yes. There was a hand. Yes.
Just to follow up with, I have the same question. I have two questions, but that was one of them. So you can't, no asking for signs, none of that? Like.
If we really love them,
Right.
if we really love them, then we let them have peace.
What about people who do have images? The issue is that you just can't ask for it, and if they
Yeah.
come, they come.
Yes, my father continued coming to me even though I never asked again. He came to me to announce the birth of each one of my children following that. But I never asked him again to come.
Well, and my other question is, this seems like such an impactful message that, do you ever speak to kids about this? Because I feel like if they heard this at an early age, that they would be tuned into this message and it would be very impactful.
My kids know about it. My students know about it. Yeah, so... Yeah, it's... I've spoken about it in yeshivas, in summer camps. I even remember a child in a summer camp where I spoke one summer, and the little girl told me that her grandfather had an NDE. And he was a doctor in Israel, and they called him in the middle of the night for some emergency, and I can't remember if he had a car accident and he crashed or something happened, but he died. And he went up, and I trying to remember the details. Basically, they granted him more time, which is unusual. And he asked to live to see his child married, and they granted that. I remember hearing this from the little girl in the camp.
But doesn't that mean it wasn't his time as predetermined,
It sounded more like he got an extension. So the lines are somewhat blurred sometimes.
So you could get an extension.
Apparently, yes. Yes. The more.
Well, that that answered the next question I had for you, because if it's your days are numbered and predetermined, why at Yom Kippur then do we write, please avert the evil decree?
Yes.
It's because you could get extended, or how does?
Okay, so in the Talmud, not from near-death experiences, but in the Talmud, there is a story of Rabbi Akiva's daughter. When Rabbi Akiva's daughter was born, Rabbi Akiva walked through the marketplace and he heard two astrologers speaking, and one of them said to the other, "Look at that man," pointing at Rabbi Akiva. A daughter was born to him and she will die on the day of her wedding. And Rabbi Akiva did not want to prevent his daughter from living a normal, regular life, so he didn't tell her. So she got married. The morning after the wedding, he rushed to see his daughter, and she was alive. He said, "Do you mind if I see your room?" She said, "Okay, go ahead." He came in, and there was a dead, poisonous snake pinned to the wall. She had a long pin in her hair, holding on the veil. And it was this long, and she took it off. It was dark in those days; they didn't have electricity, and she pinned it in the wall behind her bed. And in the morning, they found that she had pinned that snake that was coming to bite her. So her father, Rabbi Akiva, asked her, "Okay, anything unusual yesterday?" "Well, I got married." "Anything else unusual yesterday?" And she said, "Did you do any special mitzvah?" So she's thinking, "Well, in the middle of the wedding feast, I noticed a poor man at the door." Now, this is Rabbi Akiva's daughter's wedding. There was probably hundreds or thousands of people, because Rabbi Akiva, he had 24,000 students. He was a big guy. So she said, "I noticed at the door a beggar who looked hungry, but was ashamed to come in because he was a beggar. So I realized that he needs food. I didn't want to wait. I grabbed my own plate, which had just been served to me, and I ran to the door and gave him my own plate of food." So Rabbi Akiva said, "Tzedakah tatzil mimaves," that giving charity can save a person from death. So an extraordinary action could extend or shorten a person's life. It depends in which direction the extraordinary action goes. Was there another hand here? Yes.
The Zohar talks about 5 soul levels: Neshama, Nefesh, Ruach. Do you go whole up there? Do you go, parts of you go up there?
Do you want me to respond to that from the perspective of NDEs or from the perspective of Kabbalah?
Combine them.
That costs more.
There's some chocolate here. How about that?
I'll take a cup of tea with no caffeine. Any tea with no caffeine. Okay. Yeah?
So, you know how some people are humble about doing mitzvahs?
Yeah.
Do mitzvahs, but they don't announce it. And, so in the world to come, you said there are gradations. Some people shine bright because of the mitzvahs they did, and some people stay dim because mitzvahs they didn't do. But don't person who was humble doing mitzvahs would like to stay humble and not shine too much
Thank you.
compared to a person who didn't
Thank you,
have
Nasty. Thank you.
that many mitzvahs. I mean, it's kind of showing, look at me, I did so many mitzvahs, I'm shining, but other people are not as shining. How does it work?
Very good. Can I answer her question too? She was waiting. Yeah. There was a question there waiting. Okay. So we're talking about the 5 levels of the soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Okay. This is what it says in Kabbalah. When we are born, we get a nefesh. We are born with a nefesh. The nefesh is what keeps the body alive. If we work on ourselves to do mitzvahs, to learn Torah, and to improve, then by the time of Bar or Bas Mitzvah, we get the next step up, Ruach. The next step up, Ruach. In other words, these levels of the soul are up in the spiritual world. Whatever your concept is of soul, it might be a little bit different. The part of the soul that's in the body to keep the body alive is a small fraction of the actual soul. So we are born in order for the body to be alive, and nefesh, the lowest level of soul, comes into the body. It's enough to give life to the body to be alive. By the age of bar or bat mitzvah, if the person has worked on themselves to improve, develop positive personality traits, keep the mitzvahs and so on, we get a ruach, nefesh ruach. The neshama would come in the same way at the age of 20 years old to a person who has worked for 20 years to develop spiritually, to improve. Because we are all born with negative personality traits. Children are so cute and beautiful, but if you notice, the first things that children say are mine, give me, and I want. Along with mama and dada. Because we are born naturally selfish. And the parents teach the children to overcome this and to be kind and sharing and so on. In a way that, slowly. That's something that children can handle without being traumatized. So as we work on ourselves to develop, by the age of 20, we can get the neshama. The chaya and the yechida levels of the soul remain above. You might not like to hear what comes next, but you asked.
I can take it.
Good. If a person becomes angry and acts out of anger, all levels of soul leave the body. This is written both in the Zohar and in the writings of the Arizal. So all major Kabbalists agree on this concept, that getting angry and acting out of anger. I mean, you can feel feelings inside. Nobody has consequences for feeling. But acting out of anger would sort of frighten away the soul in all its levels, nefesh, ruach, and neshama. And a minuscule particle of life force would remain with the person to keep the body alive. So when the person leaves, these different levels of soul have access to different spiritual worlds according to the person's achievements. There were people, and now from the perspective of NDEs, there were people in exceptional cases who related that they felt that parts of them were in one area and other parts of them were in another area. Something we cannot do with a body, but we couldn't do with a spirit. Okay, now you need to remind me what your question was. Over there?
Being humble.
Yeah, some people, when they do mitzvahs, they remain humble.
Yeah.
And so
Okay. So in this world, you have an option.
Just repeat the question.
The question is, in this world, some people are very humble and they don't like to brag about their mitzvahs, but in the other world, when we get to Olam Haba, so everybody sees how much light we have, so what about the people who want to be humble and hide their light? So there are certain things for which we have, in this world, we have what's called Bechira Chofshis, which means freedom of choice. And therefore, being humble is very meritorious, and it's very positive, and it's good to be humble, and you should not brag, and keep your mitzvah secret, and that's really great. In the other world, there is not really freedom of choice. It's like you were born with this body. You could look in the mirror and say, I'm beautiful. Or you can look in the mirror and say, who's that? Or, you don't choose your height, your eye color, the way you look. In the other world, you choose what you're going to look like, but you choose while you are here. So when you get there, just like you didn't choose to be beautiful, you were born beautiful, you didn't choose that, so in the other world, you arrive and you are as beautiful as your good deeds make you be. You can be humble about it and not put on any makeup, but that's who you are.
I have a question. Have you studied reincarnation?
A little bit. Yeah.
I have a grandson who talks about his former life.
That it
Very
happens
little.
sometimes.
Very, very little.
Yeah. How old is he?
Well, now he's going to be 10, but when he was 2, he was talking about his job, what he did. It's pretty amazing.
Yes. So there is a system by which the soul is sort of cleared of memories before it comes into a new life. But sometimes there are glitches, and it doesn't work well. And it happens that sometimes.
Not everybody comes back. I mean, some people.
So once you've accomplished everything you had to do,
You're done.
you're done, and you can stay up.
Right.
Okay, ladies, that has been my pleasure speaking with you tonight. And if you would like to continue, I will sit down, and if anybody wants to continue questions, we could all sit down together. Okay? Good night.